I walked into my bedroom to find shreds of satin and lace scattered across the floor. My wedding dress, the one I'd dreamed of wearing since I was a little girl, was gone. And standing there with scissors in her hand was my mother-in-law. Her reason? Because I refused to let her wear it. My name's Emily, I'm 28, and I was just weeks away from marrying the love of my life, Daniel. From the start, his mom, Margaret, and I had what I thought was a polite, if slightly distant, relationship. She was strong-willed, opinionated, but I never imagined she could be dangerous. Planning the wedding should have been the happiest time of my life, but Margaret had a way of making every decision feel like a battle. Still, nothing could have prepared me for the moment she decided to teach me a lesson. That's when my dream wedding turned into a nightmare. Before I tell you exactly how things spiraled out of control, I want to know, what would you do if someone destroyed something priceless to you? Let me know in the comments, and if you love true stories like this, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. When Daniel proposed to me on a quiet evening in our favorite park, I thought my life had reached its perfect chapter. We'd been dating for 3 years, and he was everything I had ever wanted, kind, dependable, and with a smile that could melt my worst days. Meeting his mother, Margaret, had been interesting. She was elegant in a way that demanded attention, always dressed perfectly, with a voice that somehow made even compliments sound like veiled criticisms. The first time she shook my hand, she looked me up and down and said, "You're prettier than I expected." I laughed it off, but something about the way she lingered on the word expected made me uneasy. As the engagement celebrations began, Margaret took it upon herself to be heavily involved in the wedding planning. She insisted on joining me for dress shopping, despite me gently suggesting it might be something I wanted to do with my mom and best friend. "Oh, nonsense," she said, waving her manicured hand. "I have impeccable taste. You'll thank me." At the boutique, I tried on dress after dress, searching for the one that felt like me. When I stepped out in the gown I eventually chose, a delicate lace bodice with flowing satin skirts, my mom teared up immediately. Margaret's reaction was different. She narrowed her eyes, tilting her head, then said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "That would look stunning on me. You know, I was just about your size when I got married." I laughed awkwardly, thinking she was joking. But over the next few weeks, the comments kept coming. "Are you sure you don't want me to try it on? Just for fun, or imagine how sentimental it would be, mother and bride sharing the same dress." I told her it didn't feel right, but she brushed it off, acting like I was being overly sensitive. There were other moments too, her insisting on choosing the flowers, changing the guest list without asking, even telling the caterer she'd handle the real menu. Daniel told me she just liked to be involved and that it was easier to let her have her way sometimes. I tried to believe him. But deep down, I knew there was a line, and Margaret was inching closer and closer to crossing it. I'd always imagined finding my wedding dress would be one of those once-in-a-lifetime moments. And it was, at first. The day I found the dress, it felt like every detail was falling into place. The lace bodice hugged me in all the right ways, the satin skirt flowed like water when I walked, and the small pearl buttons down the back gave it a timeless elegance. When I stepped out of the fitting room, my mom's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "This is it," she whispered. I looked at myself in the mirror and felt that same certainty. This was my dress, not just fabric and thread, but a piece of the day I'd been dreaming about since I was a little girl. Margaret was there too, sitting with one leg crossed over the other, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. She smiled slowly, then said, "That would look stunning on me. I can already picture it." I laughed politely, assuming it was a passing comment. But it wasn't. A few days later, she called me out of the blue. "Emily," she began, her tone light but purposeful, "you know, it would mean a lot to me to try on your dress before the wedding. Just for a few photos." I hesitated. "I'm not really comfortable with that. It's personal." "Oh, don't be silly," she said. "It's not like I'm going to ruin it. Think of it as a bonding moment between us." I changed the subject, hoping that was the end of it. But at dinner with Daniel the following week, she brought it up again, this time in front of his relatives. "Emily doesn't want me to try on her dress," she announced with a playful pout. "Can you believe that?" Everyone chuckled awkwardly, and I felt my face heat up. Her tactics grew bolder. She started dropping by our apartment unannounced, asking if the dress was around so she could just have a peek. One afternoon, I caught her in my bedroom while I was in the kitchen making tea. She was standing inches from the garment bag, her hand resting on the zipper. "I was just admiring it," she said with a smile that didn't feel innocent. Each time I said no, she acted like I was overreacting, framing my boundaries as hostility. Daniel told me to ignore it, that she'd eventually drop the idea. But she didn't. The week before the wedding, she called again, this time sounding irritated. "I don't see why it's such a big deal, Emily. It's just a dress. You're only going to wear it once." I stood my ground, telling her for the final time that she would not be wearing it under any circumstances. What I didn't know then was that saying no that day was the spark that lit the fuse. If you were in my shoes, would you have let her try it on just to keep the peace, or stood your ground like I did? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to hear how this decision exploded into full-blown chaos, stay with me, because it gets worse. The final confrontation happened over something as simple as a phone call. It was 5 days before the wedding, and I was knee-deep in last-minute details, confirming the florist, finalizing the seating chart, making sure everything was perfect. My phone buzzed, and Margaret's name lit up the screen. Her voice was unusually chipper. "Emily, I was thinking, why don't we make a special moment out of me wearing your dress before the ceremony? We could take photos together, and it would be so symbolic, the passing of the torch from one woman in the family to another." I took a deep breath. "Margaret, I've told you before, that's not going to happen. It's my wedding dress, and I'm saving it for my wedding day." Her tone shifted instantly, dripping with irritation. "You're being ridiculous." I raised my son. "I've welcomed you into this family, and this is the thanks I get? You can't even share a dress?" "It's not about sharing," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "It's about boundaries. I'm not comfortable with it, and that's final." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she exhaled sharply. "Fine. If you want to be ungrateful and selfish, that's on you." And with that, she hung up. From that moment, the atmosphere shifted completely. Margaret didn't speak to me at the rehearsal dinner, barely acknowledged my presence, and instead spent most of the evening whispering with relatives, occasionally glancing in my direction. I later found out she had told some of them I was turning into a bridezilla and shutting her out of her own son's wedding. Even Daniel noticed the frost in the air. "She's just hurt," he tried to explain. "She'll come around." But I wasn't so sure. Something about the look she gave me that night, cold, calculated, told me this wasn't just hurt feelings. I thought the worst she could do was make the wedding day uncomfortable. Maybe she'd refuse to smile in the photos, or skip a speech. I never imagined she would take it further. But as I went to bed that night, there was a lingering unease in my chest, a quiet voice telling me I'd just crossed an invisible line. And Margaret wasn't the kind of woman who let slights, real or imagined, go unpunished. I just didn't know her version of punishment would leave me standing in a pile of shredded satin days later. It happened 2 days before the wedding. I had stepped out for less than an hour to meet my maid of honor for coffee. When I came home, the apartment was too quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy. I walked toward my bedroom, already planning to check the dress one last time before the big day. The door was slightly ajar. The first thing I noticed was the smell, sharp, like fabric glue and dust. Then my eyes moved to the floor. White satin. Torn in jagged strips. Lace panels crumpled like discarded tissue. Tiny pearl beads scattered across the carpet, some still rolling slowly from where they'd fallen. My veil lay twisted in the corner, the comb snapped in half. And in the middle of it all stood Margaret. She was holding a pair of sewing scissors, the blades open. Her expression was calm, disturbingly so, as she looked up at me. Well, she said, I guess no one's wearing it now. I couldn't speak. My throat closed, my heart pounded so violently I could feel it in my ears. My hands began to tremble, and I gripped the doorframe to keep from collapsing. What did you do? I finally managed to whisper. Her voice was steady, almost smug. You told me I couldn't wear it. So I made sure no one could. She set the scissors down on my nightstand with a deliberate click. I dropped to my knees, my fingers brushing over the shredded fabric. The dress no longer looked like the one I had fallen in love with. It was unrecognizable, a pile of destroyed dreams and hours of careful stitching, ruined in minutes. My eyes blurred with tears until I couldn't see the details anymore. I could feel my whole body shaking, my breathing uneven. My mind was scrambling for logic, for a reason that made sense, but there was none. Why? I asked again, my voice breaking this time. Because you humiliated me, she replied simply, before walking past me and out of the apartment. The sound of the front door clicking shut echoed through the room. I stayed there on the floor, surrounded by the pieces of what was supposed to be the most meaningful thing I'd ever worn. I didn't move for what felt like hours. The air felt thick, my chest tight. I couldn't even cry properly, the shock was too strong. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew this moment would change everything. Not just the wedding, but my relationship with Daniel, and maybe even my future with his family. But right then, all I could do was stare at the wreckage. If someone destroyed something you'd been dreaming of your entire life, could you ever forgive them? Tell me in the comments, and if you want to hear how this story spirals even further, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest. Daniel came home less than an hour after Margaret left. He found me still on the bedroom floor, my hands buried in the shredded fabric. His eyes widened as he stepped inside. What happened? He asked, his voice a mix of confusion and alarm. Your mother, I said flatly. She destroyed it. She cut it to pieces. For a moment, he just stood there, silent, like he couldn't process what I was saying. Then he rubbed his forehead. Emily, are you sure? I stared at him. I saw her do it, Daniel. She told me exactly why. His jaw tightened. I'll talk to her. But there was hesitation in his voice, not outrage, not the immediate defense I expected. By that evening, word had already spread through both sides of the family. Some relatives texted me, horrified. Others, mostly on Daniel's side, implied I must have provoked her, that I'd been too stubborn about the dress. One even suggested it was just a piece of clothing and that I shouldn't ruin the wedding over something material. Margaret, of course, had her own version of events. She told people she'd accidentally damaged the dress while trying to help. She left out the part about the scissors, the smirk, the deliberate cuts. The next day, instead of enjoying the final preparations for the wedding, I was scrambling to find a replacement dress. The boutique couldn't replicate my original gown in time, so I had to settle for something off the rack. It was pretty, but it wasn't mine. Every time I looked at it, I felt a hollow ache in my chest. Daniel did confront his mother, but it turned into an argument between them, not a defense of me. She's still my mother, he kept saying, as though that somehow lessened what she'd done. He urged me to just focus on the wedding and not let her win. But the damage wasn't just to the dress. It was to my trust, in her, and in him. At the rehearsal dinner, Margaret acted as though nothing had happened. She smiled in photos, chatted with guests, and even complimented my new dress in front of people, adding, "See, everything worked out for the best." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled tightly, knowing that tomorrow, I'd have to decide whether I could go through with marrying into this family, or walk away before saying I do. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at the new dress hanging in the corner. It was beautiful, objectively. But it wasn't the one I had dreamed of. And that dress wasn't the only thing I'd lost. I felt like a piece of the joy had been stolen too. Daniel knocked softly before stepping in. He looked tired. Emily. I know things have been awful. But can we please try to get through tomorrow? For us? I didn't answer right away. In my mind, the scene kept replaying, Margaret standing over the shredded satin, her voice calm as she told me no one would wear it now. That wasn't an accident. That was intent. Daniel, I finally said, I can't pretend nothing happened. I don't want her at the wedding. His eyes widened. You're asking me to uninvite my mother? I'm asking you to protect me, I said quietly. If she's there, she'll find another way to hurt me. Maybe not physically, but she'll do something. And I don't want that on our wedding day. We argued for over an hour. He insisted she'd behave. I reminded him she already crossed a line most people wouldn't even imagine crossing. Every word felt like we were pulling further apart. In the end, I realized I had two choices. Keep her on the guest list, smile through the pain, and prioritize family harmony over my own peace. Draw the line here, even if it meant starting our marriage with tension, or possibly ending it before it began. I chose peace. The next morning, I told Daniel I couldn't go through with it if she was there. He made the call. Margaret didn't take it well, but she didn't show up. The ceremony was smaller than planned, and there were whispers from the guests who noticed her absence. But for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. I could stand in front of the man I loved and focus on us, not on the shadow of someone waiting to ruin the moment. Was it perfect? No. The missing chair in the front row was a constant reminder of what had happened. But when I looked back at the photos later, I saw my own smile, real, unforced. And in that moment, I knew I had made the right choice. Looking back, the dress was never just a dress. It represented months of planning, a lifetime of dreaming, and a moment I wanted to remember for all the right reasons. Margaret didn't just ruin fabric, she tried to take control of something deeply personal, and she crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. What I learned is simple: boundaries are only as strong as the consequences you're willing to enforce. If you let someone break them without pushback, they'll keep pushing until there's nothing left of you to respect. Family isn't an automatic free pass to hurt you. Blood ties don't erase cruelty, and keeping the peace sometimes means sacrificing your own. I realized that protecting my peace wasn't selfish, it was necessary. The choice I made wasn't easy, and it came with fallout. But I can live with that, because I stood up for myself. So if you're watching this and struggling with someone toxic in your life, remember this: sometimes protecting your peace means standing up, even if it means losing someone. And that's not weakness. That's strength. If this story hit close to home, you're not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments, I read every one. And if you want more real stories about standing up for yourself, subscribe now so you never miss the next one. Your peace matters.